the architect of ruin, betrayal, revenge, and demand, and the unlikely ally. Like and subscribe for more stories filled with drama and betrayal. And don't forget to comment what you would do in our protagonist's situation. This is where the real fight begins. When the perfect life shatters in 3 words, he stood before her, the architect of her perfect life, and with 3 words, he utterly tore it down. I am leaving you. Lucinda Hayes felt the crystal goblet slip from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor, a perfect, violent metaphor for her heart. She was 7 months pregnant, expecting their son, the heir to the Montejo fortune, a fortune her own family had helped build. But her husband, Nate, had found a new partner, a wealthier heiress. He didn't just want a divorce. He wanted to erase her and their child. Thrown out and penniless, she found an ally in the only man Nate feared most, his ruthless rival, Elias Vance. This isn't just a story of betrayal. It's the story of how a mother's love, forged in the fire of ruin, and an enemy's promise born of a forgotten debt, built a fortress around a child the city's most powerful man would try to tear down and fail. The gala and the shadow, the crystal chandeliers of the Metamorphosis Charity Gala, dripped light like liquid diamonds, casting a golden sheen over the city's elite. Lucinda Hayes, her hand resting protectively over the gentle curve of her belly, watched her husband, Nate Montejo, move through the room. He moved with the grace of a predator. His smile was a carefully calibrated weapon that disarmed competitors and charmed investors. He was handsome, incredibly handsome, and for the last 5 years, he had been hers. Their life was a masterpiece of perfection. The enormous penthouse overlooking Hyde Park, weekends on the French Riviera, closets full of bespoke suits and haute couture dresses. Everything was part of the Montejo brand, a brand built on Nate's sharp intelligence and the solid foundation of Lucinda's old money family fortune, the Hayeses. Her father had seen Nate's ambition as a perfect match for the family legacy. He had sponsored the boy from the wrong neighborhood, given him the seed capital, consolidated, and handed him his most cherished treasure. His daughter, your shining treasure, a voice said beside her. It was Beatrice Sinclair, a woman whose face was as tight as her social circle. Lucinda offered a polite smile. It's the pregnancy glow, Beatrice, or so they tell me. Well, it suits you better than most. Nate must be delighted. A son to carry on the name. He is, Lucinda said, her gaze finding him again across the ballroom. He was in a seemingly friendly conversation with the infamous telecommunications magnate, Mr. Castro. Next to Castro was his daughter, Sophia, a woman who looked as if she had been sculpted from ice and diamonds. She laughed at something Nate said, her head tilted, a scarlet mouth against pale skin. A pang of unease, a feeling that had become too familiar lately, tightened Lucinda's chest. It was the late nights at the office, the whispered phone calls he abruptly ended when she entered the room, the faint scent of a perfume, not hers, that clung to his jacket collar. He always had a plausible explanation. A deal was closing. A crisis was being averted. You know how it is, Lucinda. To stay on top, you can never rest. And she, wanting to be the supportive wife, the perfect partner, had accepted it. She had pushed her doubts into the dark corners of her mind, focusing instead on the baby's room being painted in soft blues and creams, on the small life fluttering inside her. Her eyes scanned the room and settled on a figure standing alone near the French doors leading to the terrace. Elias Vance, the only man in London who could make Nate flinch. Vance was new money, a ghost who had emerged from the shadows of Silicon Valley 5 years ago and had been systematically dismantling his competitors ever since. His rivalry with Nate was legendary in the city. Where Nate was polished charm, Elias was brutal efficiency. He didn't shake hands. He conquered. He looked different from the photos in Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. Taller, darker. An intensity radiated from him that seemed to suck the air from his immediate surroundings. He wasn't smiling or socializing. He was simply watching. His gaze was an analytical spotlight that scanned everything. For one terrifying second, his eyes met hers across the crowded room. There was no warmth in them, just a flash of something she couldn't quite decipher. Recognition, perhaps? Or was it pity? She shivered and looked away, feeling as if he had seen through her carefully constructed happiness to the anxious heart beating beneath. Nate finally broke free from the Castros and returned to her side, his hand landing low on her back. "Enjoying the party, my love. It's a lovely event," she said, trying to keep her tone light. "You and Sofia Castro seem to have plenty to talk about." A flicker of annoyance crossed his face before being replaced by his signature smile. "Conrad is a necessary evil, and Sofia is his gatekeeper. It's just business, Lucinda. Always business." He leaned in and kissed her cheek, but his eyes were already scanning the crowd for his next target. The kiss felt cold, a performative gesture for the audience they were always playing to. Later that night, as their luxury car glided through the gleaming streets of London, the silence between them was heavy. Lucinda wanted to ask about the late nights, about the faint scent of gardenias on his collar, but the words wouldn't form. To ask was to be prepared for an answer she wasn't sure she could survive. Back in their penthouse, the silence stretched, amplified by the cavernous rooms and the panoramic view of the city that never slept. Nate loosened his tie, his back to her, as he stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows. "The Castro deal is going to be massive, Lucinda," he said, his voice distant. "It's the final piece. It will make us untouchable. Us." The word sounded strange, a relic from a time when she had believed it meant the two of them. Now it felt like it meant him and his ambition. "That's wonderful, Nate," she replied softly. He didn't turn around. "I need you to understand what's at stake, the level of commitment that's going to be required." "I understand," she whispered. Hand on her belly. "We both do." For a long moment he said nothing. The only sound was the drone of the city below. When he finally turned, his face was a mask she didn't recognize. The charming husband was gone, replaced by the ruthless CEO. There was no love in his eyes, only a final, chilling calculation. The golden cage she had called home was about to become her tomb. The three words that shattered everything the following week passed in a blur of forced normalcy. Nate was more distant than ever, a ghost in their opulent home. He moved with a quiet, deliberate purpose that set Lucinda on edge. He was orchestrating something. She knew it, but she clung to the hope that it was just the Castro deal, the absorbing business venture he claimed was for them. That illusion shattered on a Tuesday afternoon, the sky the color of a dull bruise that threatened rain. Lucinda was in the baby's room, carefully folding a small cashmere sweater, when Nate walked in. He made no comment about the room, about the hand-painted mural of a serene forest she had commissioned, or the small mountain of baby gifts from her ostentatious baby shower. He simply stood in the doorway. His bespoke suit looked absurdly out of place amidst the soft innocence of the room. "We need to talk," he said. His tone was flat, drained of emotion. It was the voice he used in board meetings right before dismantling a failing department. A cold dread washed over her. "All right," she said, pausing her hand over the sweater. "Is something wrong with the deal?" "The deal is fine. The deal is perfect." He walked further into the room, his expensive leather shoes silent on the plush carpet. He stopped by the crib, running a hand over the smooth, polished wood. "This, all of this, is a complication." A complication? Lucinda's voice was a weak whisper. Nate, this is our son's room. Our baby. He finally looked at her, and his eyes were as gray and cold as the storm brewing outside. I am leaving you, Lucinda. The words didn't register at first. They were just sounds unconnected to meaning. She stared at him, waiting for the punchline, for the cruel joke to end. But his expression remained unchanged, a mask of grim finality. What? I am leaving you, he repeated, cutting each word with brutal precision. I have filed for divorce. My solicitor will be in touch with yours. Lucinda felt the strength drain from her legs, and she grabbed the changing table for support. The room began to spin. Who is it for? Sofia Castro? The name tasted like venom on her tongue. He had the decency to look away. His eyes settled on the cityscape beyond the window. Sofia and I are getting married. Her father has named me a full partner in Castro Telecom. This merger isn't just business, Lucinda. It's a dynasty. The brazen audacity, the cold, transactional nature of his betrayal stole her breath away. He was trading her in, trading his family for a better business deal. A dynasty. What about our family? What about your son? Her voice broke. Tears finally blurred her vision. The baby changes things, he said, turning back to her. His face was set, resolute. Sofia's family is particular. A child from a previous marriage, especially one born so close to our own union, would be an embarrassment. A loose end. A loose end? She shrieked, the sound raw and hurting. He is your son! He is a part of you! Which is why this must be handled cleanly, Nate continued, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper, as if discussing a hostile takeover, not the fate of his child. I have a proposal. I'm prepared to offer you a very generous settlement, more than enough for you to live comfortably, to go somewhere new, to start fresh. I don't want your money, Nate. I want my husband. I want a father for my son. You're not listening, he hissed, taking a step closer. The mask of civility was gone, revealing the ugliness beneath. The settlement is contingent on one thing, that you terminate the pregnancy. The air rushed out of her lungs in a single, ragged gasp. The room tilted violently. For a moment, she thought she might faint. He was asking her to kill their child, to erase the last living piece of the love she thought they had shared, all for the sake of his ambition. Get out, she whispered. The words trembled with a rage so deep she felt it could shatter her bones. Lucinda, be reasonable. A child will only tie you to a past that's over. This is a clean break for both of us. You can be free. Get out! She screamed, grabbing a porcelain lamp from a side table and hurling it at him. It shattered against the wall just behind his head. The sound of smashing ceramic echoed the destruction in the room and in her heart. He didn't even flinch. He simply smoothed his tie. His expression hardened into one of complete contempt. I see you are going to be difficult. I had hoped to handle this with dignity. Dignity? You walk into our baby's room and ask me to murder him for your career, and you talk about dignity? Her body shook with sobs, a storm of grief and fury erupting inside her. Fine, he said, his voice like ice. Have it your way, but don't think for a second you'll get anything from me. Our prenuptial agreement is ironclad, something your own father insisted upon. Every asset, every Montejo consolidated stock option is in my name. The company was failing when we married. I am the one who made it what it is. You will leave this marriage with what you brought into it, the Hayes name, and not much else. He was cutting her off completely, leaving her stranded. He had used her family's money and connections to build his empire, and now he was casting her aside with nothing. My father trusted you, she choked out. Your father is dead, Nate said, with chilling finality. He made a bad investment. I'm correcting it now. He turned and walked out of the baby's room, leaving her alone amidst the wreckage of their future. She sank to the floor, her hands wrapping around her belly. The small, innocent life inside her, the only real thing left in a world that had just been stripped of all its truth and beauty. The rain finally broke outside, lashing against the windows as Lucinda Hayes sat on the floor of a room built for a son who would now never know his father. And she wept. Audience question: what do you think of Nate's behavior? Do you believe Lucinda can survive this alone? Share your thoughts in the comments. The fall and the despair. The days that followed were a masterclass in systematic cruelty. Nate, true to his word, moved with the swift, impersonal efficiency of a corporate raider dismantling a firm. The first notice was an email from the building management, politely informing her that the corporate lease on the penthouse was being terminated, and that she had 30 days to vacate. The joint bank accounts were frozen, then emptied. The credit cards were declined. The black luxury car and its driver vanished. Her world, once a boundless horizon of privilege, shrank to the size of a few cardboard boxes. The society friends who had toasted her at her baby shower now averted their eyes in the few places she still frequented. Their whispers followed her like a cold wind. She was no longer Lucinda Navarro Montejo. The elegant wife of a titan was a scandal, a cautionary tale, a woman scorned, and worst of all, a woman left penniless. In their world, poverty was the only unforgivable sin. She packed the baby's room herself, every small outfit and soft blanket, another dagger in her heart. She was a ghost, haunting the shell of her own life, surrounded by objects that no longer belonged to her. The city she had once considered her kingdom now felt alien and hostile. Every skyscraper seemed to mock her, a monument to the power and wealth that had been stolen from her. Her solicitor, a kind but weary man named Mr. Der Davies, who had served her family for 40 years, laid out the grim reality. The prenuptial agreement is a fortress, Lucinda. Your father helped draft it to protect the family's assets should the marriage fail. The irony is that Nate has twisted it. He has successfully argued that because he absorbed Hayes Industries into Montejo Consolidated and then grew the company exponentially, all the assets are now considered his creation. Your father's original investment is a pittance compared to the company's current valuation. So I get nothing? She asked. Her voice hollow. He is legally obligated to provide child support once the baby is born, Mr. Davies said, a small mercy in a sea of devastation. But Nate is already laying the groundwork to fight for full custody, claiming you are emotionally unstable and financially incapable of caring for a child. The cruelty was breathtaking. He wouldn't help her, but he would use her desperation against her to steal her son. With the small amount of money she had in a premarital personal account, she rented a tiny one-bedroom apartment in a dreary part of Brooklyn, a world away from the gleaming spires of Manhattan. The air was thick with the smell of exhaust fumes and street food. Sirens at night replaced the soft hum of the penthouse climate control. It was a humiliating and terrifying freefall. She sold her jewelry piece by piece. The diamond earrings Nate gave her for their first anniversary paid 3 months' rent. Her grandmother's pearl necklace covered her initial doctor's visits for the baby. Each transaction felt like she was selling a piece of her past, a piece of herself. One rainy afternoon, heavily pregnant and emotionally exhausted, she stood in a crowded grocery store, her items on the conveyor belt. A carton of milk, a loaf of bread, some eggs, prenatal vitamins. The total came to $27.20. She swiped her debit card. Declined. A heat of shame rose up her neck. She tried again. Declined. The account was empty. She had miscalculated. "Ma'am?" the cashier asked, his voice edged with impatience. The people in line behind her began to murmur. Lucinda's eyes filled with tears. She fumbled in her purse. Her hands trembled, searching for the few loose bills she knew weren't there. She was forced to leave the groceries on the counter, mumbling an apology as she fled the store. The sympathetic and critical glances of strangers burning her back. She walked for blocks in the rain, uncaring that she was soaked to the bone. The feeling of utter, complete humiliation was a cold, hard knot in her stomach. She was going to bring a child into this world, and she couldn't even afford to buy milk. That night, she sat in the darkness in her small, unfamiliar apartment. The sounds of the city, an oppressive roar. The eviction notice from the penthouse had arrived that morning, a cold, official document marking the definitive end of her old life. She was completely alone, stripped of her identity, her security, and her dignity. She had hit rock bottom. The fall was complete. She held her belly. The baby's soft kicks, a reminder of the one thing Nate couldn't take from her. He was all she had left. As despair threatened to swallow her whole, she made a silent promise to the son she hadn't yet met. "I won't let him break us. I will find a way." But as she stared out the window at the rain, for the first time in her life, she had no idea how. The unlikely alliance. 3 weeks before her due date, the final eviction notice arrived. It was a stark warning, red lettering taped to her apartment door, a public declaration of her failure. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. She had nowhere to go. Her remaining funds were nearly depleted, and the prospect of finding a new apartment in her condition, with no income and no references, was impossible. She spent the morning on the phone calling shelters, her voice thick with shame. They were all full. As she sat on her worn sofa, the terrifying reality of giving birth on the streets looming over her, there was a sharp knock on the door. Her heart leaped, assuming it was the landlord or a city marshal. She ignored it, hoping they would leave. The knock came again, harder this time, more insistent. With a deep sigh, she heavily rose and shuffled to the door, peering through the peephole. A man in an impeccably tailored dark suit stood in the gloomy hallway. For a moment, she didn't recognize him. Then, her blood ran cold. It was Elias Vance. Her mind raced. What was he doing here? How had he found her? Was this some new, cruel game of Nate's, sending his arch-rival to gloat in her ruin? Her protective instincts flared, and she slid the latch, opening the door only a few inches. "What do you want?" she demanded, her voice sounding stronger than she felt. Elias Vance's eyes, the same intense, analytical eyes she remembered from the gala, took in her appearance, her worn maternity dress, the fear in her expression, the visible state of the dilapidated apartment behind her. He didn't sneer. He didn't smile. His face was a stoic mask. "Mrs. Montejo," he said, his voice a low baritone. "My name is Elias Vance. May I speak with you?" "It's Hayes," she corrected him sharply. "And I have nothing to say to you. You're my husband's friend." "Ex-husband," he clarified, a subtle but significant distinction. "And Nate Montejo and I are not, nor have we ever been, friends. Quite the opposite." He paused. "I am here because of your father, Robert Hayes." The mention of her father, deceased 3 years prior, was a shock that momentarily disarmed her. "My father? He was my mentor," Elias said simply. "When I was 19 and had nothing but a half-formed business plan for a software company, he saw something in me. He gave me a small seed investment, not from his company, but from his own pocket. He made me promise never to mention it until I had built my own name. That investment was the foundation of everything I have today. I owe him a debt I can never truly repay." Lucinda stared at him, speechless. Her father had a gift for finding and nurturing young talent, but he had never mentioned Elias Vance. This man, this corporate titan feared by all, was a product of her father's quiet generosity. I have been following what Nate has done to you, Elias continued, his gaze unyielding. What he is doing is not only immoral, it is a desecration of your father's legacy. Robert Hayes built his company on integrity. Nate is destroying it with greed, and he is trying to destroy his son. Why are you here? She asked again, her voice softer this time. I am here to offer you a proposition, he said. I want to help you, not out of pity but out of a sense of honor, to the man who helped me. I know you face eviction. I know your funds are gone. I know Nate plans to sue you for custody the moment the child is born. Lucinda leaned against the doorframe, the weight of her pregnancy suddenly immense. What kind of proposition? I own a secluded property outside the city, a fortress, fully equipped and secure. You can live there for as long as you need. You will have the best medical care, financial stability, everything you and your son require. You will want for nothing. The offer was so astonishing, so far outside the realm of possibility, it sounded like a trap. And what do you want in return? She asked, testing him, her suspicion returning. No one does something like this for free. Elias's expression remained unreadable. Nate's greatest weakness has always been his pride. He sees his son not as a human being, but as an asset, a continuation of his dynasty. He abandoned his child for a business deal, but the moment that child is born, his ego will demand that he possess him. He will try to take him from you. He took another step closer, his presence filling the narrow doorway. My proposal is this. I will give you every resource you need to protect your son. In return, you allow me to help you raise him. Let me provide the security and the future his father has stolen. Let me be a bulwark between your family and Nate Montejo. You want to raise my son? She stammered, horrified and confused. I want to protect him, Elias corrected. And in doing so, I want to ensure that Nate Montejo can never claim the legacy of the man he betrayed. Robert Hayes' grandson will not be raised by such a man. I will not allow it. It was a bizarre, almost futile pact, a deal born of honor, vengeance, and the ghost of a man they had both admired. Lucinda looked at this powerful, enigmatic man and saw not a threat, but a potential lifesaver. He was offering her and her unborn son sanctuary. The alternative was the street. She thought of the cold humiliation of the grocery store, the damning red letters of the eviction notice, and Nate's chilling words in the baby's room. She had promised her son she would find a way. Perhaps this was it. A dangerous, unorthodox, and desperate way. Are we clear, Mr. Vance? She said, testing him, her mind slowly starting to work again. My son will carry my surname Hayes, and I will be his mother, his only parent. You are a guardian, a benefactor, nothing more. Agreed, Elias said, accepting her terms without hesitation. He is your son. I merely offer my protection. Lucinda took a deep breath, a trembling, shuddering intake of air. She was making a deal with her husband's greatest enemy, trusting her future and her child's future to a man she barely knew. It was a leap of faith into a dark abyss, but it was better than the certain ruin that awaited her. It's a deal, Mr. Vance, she said, meeting his intense gaze. Audience question. What do you think of Lucinda's decision? Do you believe she can trust Elias Vance? Leave your comments, and tell us if you think this is the beginning of a new love story. Sanctuary and the new life. The property, known as Vance Estate, was less a house and more a kingdom carved into the lush hills outside London. A long, winding driveway, flanked by ancient oaks, led to a majestic gray stone manor overlooking a private lake. It was a fortress of tranquility and wealth, a world away from the grime and desperation of her Brooklyn apartment. Elias was true to his word. He was a discreet and respectful presence. He installed her in a beautiful suite of rooms overlooking the gardens, arranged for a team of top prenatal doctors to make house calls, and ensured she had everything she could possibly need. His staff was professional and kind, led by a warm but no-nonsense housekeeper named Mrs. Collins. For the first time in months, Lucinda could breathe. She was safe. Elias worked mostly from a large, book-filled study on the ground floor, and their interactions were initially formal. They occasionally shared a quiet dinner, during which he told her stories about her father in his early days, tales of his business acumen, his surprising humor, and his unwavering faith in people. Through Elias, Lucinda felt a connection to the father she missed so much, and she began to see the man behind the ruthless corporate reputation. She saw a man of deep loyalty, driven by a personal code of honor. As her due date neared, a strange, quiet camaraderie grew between them. He would find her in the library and wordlessly hand her a cup of decaf tea. She would leave the business section of the newspaper on his desk, open to an article she thought he would find interesting. They rarely spoke of Nate, but his presence lingered like a poison in the air. The unspoken reason for their bizarre alliance. The night she went into labor, a fierce thunderstorm raged outside, mirroring the beautiful chaos of the birth. It was Elias who found her breathing through a contraction in the hallway. His composure was absolute. He helped her into the car he already had waiting, and spoke to her in a calm, firm voice during the drive to a private hospital wing he had reserved. He never left the waiting room. Matthias Hayes was born just as the sun began to rise. The storm had passed. He was small and perfect, with a dark tuft of hair and his mother's intense blue eyes. When the nurse brought him to Lucinda, her heart expanded with a love so fierce and all-encompassing that it eclipsed all the pain and betrayal of the past year. He was hers. He was her reason for everything. Later that day, she allowed Elias to see him. He stood in the doorway of the hospital room, looking hesitant for the first time since they had met. He seemed out of place, an industry titan humbled by the sight of a small, sleeping infant. "Come in, Elias," she said softly. He approached the bassinet slowly, his gaze fixed on the baby. He looked at Matthias. His severe features softened into an expression of awe and something else, something akin to reverence. "He looks like you," Elias said, his voice quiet. "He has my eyes," Lucinda agreed, "but that furrowed brow is all yours." Elias extended a single finger and gently stroked the baby's cheek. Matthias stirred, but didn't wake. In that small, silent gesture, Lucinda saw the truth of his promise. This wasn't just revenge against Nate or a debt to her father. This powerful, solitary man was captivated. Meanwhile, back in London, Nate Montejo and Sofia Castro were on the cover of Vogue, showcasing their wedding, hailed as the social event of the year. The photos showed them in their sterile, art-filled apartment, smiling for the cameras, the perfect power couple. The article mentioned their plans for the future, for the Montejo-Castro dynasty. No mention of a child. Nate learned of the birth through a private investigator he had hired to follow Lucinda. The news landed with a thud in his chest. A son. He had a son. He looked at the photographs the PI had taken from a distance. Lucinda leaving the hospital, looking tired but radiant. And Elias Vance, his sworn enemy, carrying the baby car seat with an air of ownership. A black, possessive rage filled him. Vance was meddling in his affairs, touching what was his. "What is it, darling?" Sophia asked, walking into his study, dripping jewels from a party they were about to attend. "Nothing," Nate snapped, slamming the laptop shut. "Just a business annoyance." But it wasn't just an annoyance. It was a seed of obsession. The son he had ordered to be erased was now alive. Well, and under the protection of his greatest rival. Matthias Hayes's existence was a loose end in the perfect tapestry of his new life, and Nate Montejo did not tolerate loose ends. For now, he would ignore it, solidify his power, and enjoy his victory. But he knew with a chilling certainty that one day he would come to claim his asset. Back in the quiet serenity of Vance Estate, Lucinda watched Elias hold Matthias for the first time, his large, capable hands surprisingly soft. A new life had begun, not the one she had planned, but one forged from the ashes of the old. A life built on a bizarre foundation of honor, gratitude, and a shared love for the small boy who slept peacefully, unaware of the storm that had preceded his arrival, or the one gathering on the horizon. Don't miss the second part of this story. Like and share so more people can know this story of resilience and revenge. Comment your predictions for the custody battle. 6 years of peace and the brewing storm. The following 6 years passed in an idyllic stillness that felt both precious and precarious. Vance Estate became a sanctuary, a world unto itself, where Matthias Hayes could grow up shielded from the identity of his biological father. For Matthias, home was the sprawling property with its secret gardens and shimmering lake. Family was his mother, Lucinda, and the tall, quiet man he called Dad, Elias, who became his father in every way that mattered. Elias's transformation was subtle, but profound. The cold, calculating businessman was still there, running his global empire from his office with ruthless efficiency. But the moment he left that room, he was Matthias's father in every meaningful sense. He taught the boy to skip stones on the lake, their shared laughter echoing in the crisp autumn air. He would sit on a small chair at a tiny table for imaginary tea parties, his large figure comically out of place, a serious expression on his face as he inquired about the health of Matthias's teddy bear, Sir Reginaldo. He read him bedtime stories, his deep baritone giving voice to dragons and knights, his finger tracing the words for the small boy nestled beside him. He never overstepped. He always deferred to Lucinda on major parenting decisions, but his devotion was absolute. He was there for every scraped knee, every feverish night, every triumphant crayon-scribbled picture presented to him as a masterpiece. He was the firm, unshakable rock upon which their little family was built. Lucinda, too, flourished. With Elias's encouragement and financial backing, she returned to her first love, landscape architecture. She started a small boutique firm, working from a design studio Elias had built for her in one of the old carriage houses on the estate. Her talent, once a mere hobby, blossomed into a successful business. She reclaimed her independence and her identity, not as Nate Montejo's discarded wife, but as Lucinda Hayes, a respected designer and a loving mother. The quiet bond between her and Elias deepened into a profound friendship of trust, a partnership in the truest sense of the word. The question of romance never arose. Their shared purpose, Matthias, was too sacred to complicate. Back in London, Nate Montejo's life was a mirror image of theirs, outwardly perfect, inwardly hollow. The merger with Castro Telecom had made him spectacularly wealthy and powerful, a king in the concrete jungle. He and Sophia were regulars on the social scene, their lives a glossy performance of marital bliss. But behind the closed doors of their minimalist penthouse, the silence was deafening. Their marriage was a business contract, and it had one obvious, unfulfilled clause: an heir. After years of trying, of invasive treatments and silent disappointments, their doctors gave the final verdict. Sophia was unable to conceive. The news shattered the fragile truce of their relationship, exposing the transactional core. Mr. Castro began to look at his son-in-law with undisguised disappointment. A dynasty required a successor. It was then that Nate's thoughts began to wander, to fixate on the son he had abandoned. The loose end was now a 6-year-old boy. His obsession started small. He paid his private investigator an exorbitant sum for updates. First came the reports, then the photographs. He would stare at them for hours in the early morning, a glass of expensive whiskey in his hand. There was Matthias, on a pony, Elias guiding him, a rare, genuine smile on the man's face. There was Matthias on a swing, his mother pushing him, her face lit up with joy. There was Matthias, in a school play, dressed as a tree, with Elias and Lucinda sitting in the front row, looking, in every sense, like a proud, normal family. And in every photo, he saw a ghost of himself, the shape of the boy's jaw, the way his dark hair fell across his forehead. This was his son, his blood, his legacy, and Elias Vance was raising him. The thought was a vile poison, twisting his pride into a knot of jealous fury. Vance hadn't just beaten him in business, he had stolen his son, his very immortality. Nate began to investigate, using his vast resources to unearth every detail of their lives. He learned Matthias's favorite color, blue, his favorite food, macaroni and cheese, and that he wanted to be an astronaut when he grew up. He knew Matthias's teacher's name and his best friends. He became a digital phantom, a voyeur spying on the happy life he had thrown away. The breaking point came on his own birthday. Sophia threw him a lavish party, a room full of people who admired his wealth but knew nothing of the man. As they toasted his success, he saw a new photo on his secure phone. It was of Matthias, a gap-toothed smile on his face, holding a homemade birthday card. The PI's caption read, "Subject celebrating Elias Vance's birthday." They were celebrating his enemy. His son was calling his enemy Dad. The illusion of his perfect life crumbled to dust. The wealth, the power, the beautiful wife, it was all meaningless. He no longer wanted a dynasty. He wanted his son. The child was no longer a complication to be erased, or an asset to be possessed. In Nate's twisted mind, Matthias had become the prize in the final competition against Elias Vance. And Nate Montejo never, ever, lost. He picked up the phone and dialed the number of the state's most ruthless family solicitor. "My name is Nate Montejo," he said, his voice cold and clear. "I want to gain custody of my son." Audience question. What do you think of Nate's obsession? Do you believe he has any chance of winning? Tell us your opinion in the comments. The custody war. Integrity for his acquisition, the legal documents arrived one crisp October morning, delivered by a stone-faced courier. The sheer thickness of the file was an act of intimidation itself. Lucinda's hands trembled as she read the petition. Nate Montejo versus Lucinda Hayes for full legal and physical custody of Matthias Hayes. The petition was a work of fiction, a masterpiece of character assassination. It painted Lucinda as an unstable, gold-digging opportunist who had fallen into the clutches of Elias Vance, a man of dubious character who had insidiously alienated the child from his natural father. It portrayed Nate as the grieving father who, after a period of emotional turmoil following his bitter divorce, was now financially and emotionally prepared to provide his son with the stable, loving home he deserved. It was filled with outright lies, cruel half-truths, and vicious inversions of reality. Elias read it over her shoulder, his face hardened like granite. "He isn't just coming for Matthias," he said, his voice a low growl. "He's coming for everything. He wants to destroy us." The ensuing battle was brutal and public. Nate used the media as his personal weapon, leaking sanitized versions of his court documents to gossip columnists. Headlines screamed in the tabloids, Titan fights to reclaim son from rival billionaire. Lucinda and Elias were portrayed as the villains in his carefully crafted narrative. Nate's solicitors were relentless. They subpoenaed Lucinda's financial records, her therapy notes from after the divorce, her business contracts. They interrogated Mrs. Collins and other staff members, trying to twist their loyalty into evidence of a conspiracy. They argued that Vance's estate was not a home, but a golden cage, and that Elias's presence was detrimental to the child's development. The day Lucinda had to give her deposition was one of the worst of her life. For 6 hours, Nate's lead attorney, a shark in a 1,000-pound suit named Beatrice Romero, dissected her life, her choices, her very worth as a mother. "Ms. Hayes," Romero began, her voice dripping condescension, "is it not true that you were penniless and facing eviction when you accepted Mr. Vance's generous offer?" "I was in a difficult position because my ex-husband illegally cut off access to all marital assets," Lucinda countered, her voice firm despite her furiously pounding heart. "So you entered into a financial arrangement with your ex-husband's known business enemy, an arrangement that provided you with a life of luxury in exchange for what exactly? Your son's affection? Did you make an alliance to protect your son, or did you sell him?" Romero hissed. The cruelty of the question hit her with physical force, but she met the lawyer's gaze. "My son is not a commodity. That is a concept you should discuss with your client." Elias, meanwhile, was fighting a war on a different front. He used his own formidable resources not to attack, but to defend. His legal team was a silent army of the best minds in the country. They built a fortress of evidence documenting Matthias's happy, stable, and richly fulfilling life. They had photos, videos, school reports, and testimonials from teachers, doctors, and friends, all painting a picture of a loved and thriving child. The climax came in this quiet, sterile, wood-paneled room of a closed-door custody hearing. Nate was there, looking powerful and confident in a dark suit. Sophia, a silent, anxious statue beside him. Elias was called to the stand. Beatrice Romero circled him like a predator. "Mr. Vance, you are not this child's father. You have no biological claim, no legal right. What exactly are you to Matthias Hayes?" Elias didn't look at the lawyer, but at the judge. His voice, when he spoke, was calm and clear, stripped of the anger they tried to provoke. "I am the man who holds his hand when he's afraid of the dark. I am the one who cheers the loudest at his football matches. I am the one who explains why the sky is blue and who listens to his jokes, even when I know the punchline." He paused. "You are correct. I have no biological claim. My claim is written in 6 years of bedtime stories, bandaged knees, and unconditional love. I am his father in every way that matters. I am his dad." The final blow, however, came from an unexpected source. Elias's lawyers called Sofia Castro Montejo to the stand. Nate's team protested furiously, but the judge allowed it. Sofia was pale, her composure fragile. Elias's attorney, a calm, methodical man, approached her gently. "Ms. Montejo," the attorney said, "in his petition, your husband states his desire to provide a stable, 2-parent home for his son. Do you share this desire?" Sophia hesitated. Her eyes darted toward Nate, who shot her a look of pure menace. She took a shaky breath. "Yes," she whispered. "And do you believe you can provide that stability, given the circumstances of your marriage?" "Yes." The attorney paused, then placed a file on the witness stand. "Then, can you explain to the court the documents I have before me, those signed by you and your husband hiring one of the country's top surrogacy agencies, dated 1 week after you learned Mr. Montejo had a biological son?" The room went silent. Nate stiffened. "Your Honor," the attorney continued, "Mr. Montejo has not been looking for a son. He has been looking for an heir. When it became clear his wife could not provide one, he turned to the son he had previously discarded as a loose end. He paused. This is not about love. It is about acquisition. Sophia stared at the documents, then at her husband, and something within her broke. The years of emotional neglect, of being a pawn in his dynastic ambitions, all came to a head. He told me, her voice was trembling, but finding a new strength. He told me the child was a mistake. He told me Lucinda was unfit. When he found out he was under Elias's protection, he became obsessed. He said it was the final piece of his collection, that he would own everything Elias ever wanted. It was over. The lie was exposed. Nate's carefully constructed narrative of the repentant father lay in ruins, revealing the cold, grasping ambition beneath. The judge's ruling was swift and devastating, granting Lucinda full custody and issuing a permanent restraining order against Nate. His visitation rights were suspended indefinitely. He had lost. Walking out of the courthouse, blinking in the sudden sunlight, Lucinda saw Nate standing by his car. He looked diminished, his power stripped, leaving only a hollow shell of a man. Their eyes met for a moment, and she felt nothing. No hatred, no anger, not even pity. He was simply a stranger, a ghost of a life that was no longer hers. Elias put a protective arm around her shoulder, and they walked away, leaving Nate with the ruin of his own making. Later that evening, back at the estate, they tucked Matthias into bed. "Dad," Matthias mumbled sleepily, "you won your big meeting today." Elias smoothed the hair from Matthias's forehead. "Yes, son," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We won." He and Lucinda stood in the hallway for a moment, the quiet peace of the house settling around them. She reached out and took his hand. It was not a gesture of romance, but of something deeper, a partnership, a gratitude, and an unbreakable shared bond. They had faced the storm together and emerged into the calm. They were a family, not of blood, but of choice. And in the quiet fortress of Vance Estate, they were finally, truly home. And so, the empire built on lies crumbled, and the family built on love stood stronger than ever. Nate Montejo learned the hardest lesson of all, that a child is not a possession to be reclaimed, and that a family cannot be acquired through a hostile takeover. Lucinda, Elias, and Matthias proved that the truest bonds are forged not by blood, but by choice, by sacrifice, and by showing up every single day. Their story is a powerful reminder that even in the face of the cruelest betrayal, new beginnings are possible. And sometimes, the greatest protector comes from the most unexpected place. Final call to action. What did you think of the ending? Did you feel justice was served? Let us know in the comments. And if this story of resilience and unexpected love moved you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that will keep you on the edge of your seat.